Hey guys, and welcome back for a little more remote learning of Mr. Delcourt here. We're back in the TA Forest today, and in honor of our recent reading and reflection of A Mighty Fortress from Aldo Leopold's A Sand County Almanac, we're going to do what I call the snag walk. We're going to walk through the woods in search of snags, and we'll talk a lot about the value that these trees have for wildlife, these dead or sick trees out here in the woods. And Leopold, early on in that short story, he has a line that's always stuck with me when he says, when he bought his woodlot, he realized that he inherited almost as many tree diseases as he did trees. And what he's getting at is that trees have a pile of different ailments, from actual fungal or viral diseases or parasites that can kill or harm them, but those dead trees are still very valuable to wildlife, and we have no shortage of snags in the TA Forest, which is great for our wildlife out here. We're going to start this video right here today because we found a seemingly healthy, living eastern hemlock tree growing here just behind the eastern trail field with a classic sign of pileated woodpecker damage. So that pileated woodpecker has made several holes in this tree, including this one really nice large one. You can see it's drilling all the way into the heartwood, where there's all kinds of different tunnels and stuff. Maybe carpenter ants or some sort of other insect larvae are living in the heartwood of this tree. Those pileated woodpeckers can hear them, and they're utilizing this sick tree as a food source. So there's a good example right off the bat of a snag tree, a living snag, but a snag nonetheless that's valuable to wildlife, exactly what Aldo Leopold was talking about in A Mighty Fortress. There's a nice snag right behind the eastern trail field. An old dead eastern white pine. You can see the heartwood all rotted out of it, rotted in advance of that sapwood, loaded with bugs. You can tell woodpeckers have been all through that thing. Really nice snag. Alright, we found an awesome snag out here. This is a really big white oak, Quercus alba, and the back side of this oak, as you can see here, way up the trunk, I'll show you in a moment, is exposing our rotting heartwood inside of there. Even with a wound like this on this tree, the tree is alive and well. In some years it drops a ton of white oak acorns out here that the gray squirrels and deer and turkeys really prefer and go after. But this is a classic example of a snag that has been created by lightning. You can even see the burn marks in the tree. So this tree was struck by lightning. It's got a huge scar all the way down it. The tree survived, although it's got this massive wound on it that it has somehow persisted for a long time. This tree tells a variety of stories, and we always stop in here to talk about it. Let me come back here and show you. If you look up this tree and you look just how far that lightning scar goes on that tree, it goes way up. Let me come around this side of the tree as well for you. I'll come right over here and show you some of the cool parts about this tree. So if you look, you can see the remnants of an old tree stand, the ladder for an old tree stand that somebody had. They used to hunt out here a long time ago. And this is a classic example, which we've talked about in our forestry class as well, of a wolf tree, a tree with a wide open large crown that tells me that this tree once grew in the wide open. So this tree was probably once growing when this was like pasture for cattle a long time ago. It has a big open crown in the woods where it should have a very narrow crown, and that's a hint at why it was probably struck by lightning. This tree was hit by lightning because it was growing in a field all by itself at one point, and now as we take a look around, we see it's growing right in the woods where you'd almost never imagine this tree was once out in the middle of a field. So man, this tree could tell us a whole bunch of stories. There's a beautiful white oak, Quercus alba. Alright, right along the railroad tracks here, we've got ourselves a couple more snags. We've got a dead American elm here, undoubtedly killed by Dutch elm disease. And it's another one of those fungal diseases that kills trees, but also creates snags, and I'm sure there's plenty of insect activity going on in that dead elm tree. There's one that's a little longer dead over here. You can see the bark peeling off it now. But here we go with some American elm snags right along the railroad tracks. Here we go, another snag right along the railroad tracks. Look at this eastern white pine. It's actually alive, although it's not looking super healthy. It's growing right next to a quaking aspen. But one of the coolest things is this thing is riddled with holes from pileated woodpeckers that have been hunting in the heartwood there, looking for probably pine sawyers and all kinds of other bugs living in the heartwood of that tree. We got some great snags here along the eastern trail. Another red maple snag. If we scroll up here, We can see all kinds of little cavities at the top of that snag there that cavity nesting birds like chickadees and a variety of woodpeckers may use. And then off in the distance here, there's a living red maple tree that's got some great cavities in it though. Kind of goes to prove that you don't necessarily need a dead tree to have nice snag activity. If we go way up on this living maple tree here, we can see a variety of old branches that have broken off and created nice cavities in those trees. That looks to me like a gray squirrel cavity, but when they abandon it, you better believe plenty of cavity nesting birds would use that. Even a wood duck could probably fit in that hole, and that'd be a great nesting cavity for a wood duck. So tons of creatures out here that rely on cavities, and there's no shortage of them in our snags in the TA forest. Another thing we've come up on here that Aldo Leopold was talking about in Mighty Fortress are those wind-thrown oak branches, and these are some older ones that have lost their leaves, but he talks a lot in that story about winter storms, or I'm sorry, summer storms blowing down these tops of oak trees and how they retain their leaves and how ruffed grouse use them as really valuable cover during the following winter storm. So the exact thing that Leopold writes about laying right here along the Eastern Trail, these wind-thrown tops of northern red oak trees, Quercus rubra. Here we have another great snag, another red maple snag standing here. Heartwood completely gone, riddled with woodpecker holes, some great cavities for cavity nesting birds, but there you go. Just snags galore out here, really healthy woodlot, and that's a great example of something, if people had that right in their backyard, they might take that out and say, look at that ugly dead tree. But if you've got an eye for wildlife, you look at that tree and say, wow, is that thing a valuable piece of habitat to maintain biodiversity in a woodlot.